We're now live, Chair.
Thank you, Kirsty. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Place Scrutiny Board on the Thursday, the 1st of February 2024. We've got a major two-item agenda this evening, looking at the Vision Zero Road Safety Report and a presentation from the Highways Maintenance with the report there. But in terms of going through the agenda for the formalities, do we have any substitutes and apologies, please, Diane?
Yes, Chair, we have Councillor Blackburn substituting for Councillor Atkinson, and obviously apologies from Councillor Atkinson.
Thank you very much indeed. Item 2, members' interests, as ever, to remind members of the need to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or other interests they might have in relation to the items included on the agenda, which can be declared at the time as and when they may become relevant. Item 3, admission of the public. It is not recommended that the public be excluded. Well, it's on YouTube, so yes, only people watching, good evening. With regard on item 4 to the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of January, I hope you've had a chance to have a look at them, members, and can I take someone to nominate and second for the so that we can pass them? Councillor Foster, thank you for your nomination, seconded by Councillor Caffrey. Thank you very much indeed. All those in favour? But yes, I think that's a 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5. Thank you very much indeed. That's passed. Thank you very much indeed. And when we get a chance to meet live, then I'll be signing those off in due course. I understand we don't have any deputations this evening.
No, Chair, we've not been sent anything.
Thank you very much indeed. So without too much further ado, I would like to welcome officers to present, first of all, good evening, and to the presentation of the Vision Zero Road Safety Report. I understand that we have members from Wicker as well. So good evening and welcome to you as well. And let me have a look quickly as to who was going to make the presentation for the report. No, that's escaping me at the moment.
Probably be opened by Adrian Gill, Chair.
Yeah, I was about to say, and just bear with me 1 second. Something. That's better. Yeah, sorry. Something untoward happened with my Zoom. It just compressed, so all I could see was you, Diane. So,
Okay.
but thank you very much indeed. So, yes, good evening, Adrian. Thank you very much indeed, and yeah, far away. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson, and good evening, everybody. My name's Adrian Gill. I'm the Assistant Director for Strategic Infrastructure at the Council, and I'm joined this evening by Neil Hudson, who's the Policy Manager at the Combined Authority for Vision Zero, and Derek Benn, who's our Community Safety Manager, Corporate Lead. I will now attempt to share the presentation, which I'm hoping goes to plan. Oh, sorry, apologies. Share and full screen. Can everyone? I can only see a few people, but could you give me a quick thumbs up to confirm you can see the presentation? Okay.
Yeah, that's working fine, Adrian.
Super, thank you. So I've done brief introductions. I'll head off. So the Road Traffic Act 1988 places a statutory duty on all local authorities to undertake studies into road traffic collisions and to take steps both to reduce and prevent them. Sadly, this is an issue which touches a lot of people, and in Calderdale in the last year we saw 478 people who were injured on our roads and 149 people that were killed or seriously injured. Worryingly, that's higher than in previous years, with the number of children being injured also increasing. And that's a picture that is also reflected across West Yorkshire, where we look across all casualties for the period up to August of last year. There was a 4.1% increase when compared to the 2017-19 annual average. Quite often when we talk about road safety, we talk about the fatal five, and these are the five factors which have been identified as contributing or having the most significant contribution to road safety and injury, and they are careless driving, drink and drug driving, not wearing a seatbelt, not using a mobile phone, and speeding. And sadly, when we've looked at some of the more challenging incidents we've seen across Calderdale, certainly careless driving, drink and drug, and speeding have been a common factor, and we'll perhaps come back to that later in the presentation. So why do we need a Vision Zero? Well, for all of the reasons above, really. Sadly, as I've said, casualties are increasing, both in West Yorkshire and Calderdale. We know from speaking to communities and the feedback that we get, and or the feedback you get as elected members, that dangerous driving and speeding is a real concern and issue for many communities, and something that people want us to do something about. And collectively, we believe that no death or serious injury is acceptable on our roads. So I'll just pause here and hand over to Neil from the Combined Authority, who will just talk a little bit more in detail about what Vision Zero is.
Thanks very much, Adrian. So yeah, in terms of Vision Zero, I'm here to support both Adrian and Derek in terms of the delivery of the presentation, but equally I support West Yorkshire as a whole in relation to Vision Zero. So Vision Zero is road safety aimed to eliminate all traffic fatalities and serious injuries whilst increasing safe, healthy and equitable mobility for all. And that's specific to Calderdale in terms of this presentation. We've set an aim of that being by 2040. That is consistent across West Yorkshire. But we believe that no death or serious injury is acceptable at all on our roads, and we're working in partnership. So those partnerships within Calderdale, there is a strong Vision Zero board already set up that Adrian chairs, and Derek attends from the Community Safety Partnership. Highways are obviously there, the public health side of things. It's coming together to actually look at driving down the KSIs that we refer to, killed and seriously injured. Vision Zero is actually a proven methodology originating in Scandinavia, where they've got now some of the safest roads in the world, and it is something that we all want to press within West Yorkshire as a whole. So we've got an overall structure working with a Vision Zero board chaired by the Deputy Mayor of West Yorkshire, and then we've got different levels such as the executive, steering group, comms group, data group and delivery group across West Yorkshire, and Calderdale are represented at each of those boards at different levels within the organisation. So in terms of how we look to progress, onto the next slide, we are looking at what's called a safe system approach. Effectively, we are looking at what we refer to as 5 pillars of action, and each of those pillars has a specific element involved with it, but all 5 of them work in conjunction to bring down overall killed and seriously injured numbers on our roads. So starting with the first one on the bullet point there, safe road users and behaviours. This is a key area. Education and awareness is significant when you are looking to reduce the incidents and the fatalities on our road. People need to understand their choices. They need to understand what comes from their choices. So we work specifically within the delivery group to provide training within schools. We are working with behavioural change experts across West Yorkshire to try and make these changes. And Calderdale, like I say, very much involved with those behaviours, particularly from the delivery group. In terms of safe speeds, enforcement is one part of safe speeds, and that might be down to West Yorkshire Police. But equally, the council have a significant involvement through the use of appropriate speeds in terms of the different areas, ensuring that they are appropriate, such as in and around schools, for example. I think we'd all accept that they're key areas where we would like to ensure that the speeds are at a minimum. But obviously, we are not anti-road use at all in terms of anti-car. It is a case of moving things forward for the safe and equitable mobility of all. In terms of safe roads, I know that this will be discussed as one of the later agenda items, but this is around design and maintenance. It's around the infrastructure. One element may be that you're looking at speed reducing designs, which would then link to the pillar directly above. But this is significant in terms of any new infrastructure, any new plans for the roads of Calderdale. Safe vehicles. We need to start at home first, and we need to look at our own fleets, and that is particularly important. But equally to that, we look at education, awareness, enforcement, safety features around vehicles, and ensuring that people understand how to ensure that their vehicles are safe on the roads. The last bullet point there, it's often shown as last, but for me, this is critical. This is about our victims and the prevention of future victims. So it's how we investigate, it's how we learn from the collisions that occur, and how we change the behaviours, and if necessary make changes to the infrastructure that prevents future collisions from occurring. What we've done in terms of the safe system approach across West Yorkshire, and specifically within Calderdale as well, is we've done a baseline assessment of operational readiness to adopt the Vision Zero approach under the safe system. And we've looked at exactly how we can work with that moving forward. We are in the process of developing a strategy across all of West Yorkshire, and we are engaging with each of the districts in turn. We have consulted and we have held an event that Calderdale were very strongly represented at, in order to develop that strategy, which will be coming out within the next few weeks to the partners in terms of the first draft, with a view to then looking for a launch in March. So on to the next slide, we look at why we are looking at Vision Zero rather than a traditional approach. So the traditional approach was that traffic deaths would be inevitable, but the reality is, using the safe system approach, we believe that they are preventable. We accept that we are all human and that there are failings at times. However, if we work on the 5 pillars under the safe system, we can look to prevent fatal and serious crashes from occurring. Saving lives is not expensive. Traditionally, people have said saving lives is expensive on our roads, but it's not expensive. And I think what I would perhaps do at this point is just to make it quite clear that the sort of figures that we're talking about, for every fatality on the roads of Calderdale, the DFT suggests that the cost to the taxpayer, to the society, is £2.25 million per fatality. That is a significant figure. And for me, what we need to ensure is that whilst we are looking at that in terms of the financial cost, the human cost is far more. Those people involved as either victims or the families of the victims, or people who've been involved, such as emergency services who've been present, or even those who've witnessed such crashes occurring, that is staggering in terms of the impact that does have. And there are residents within West Yorkshire as a whole, and specifically within Calderdale, that are campaigning for Vision Zero and are supporting all of the work that is being done. And what I will now do is I'll pause to pass back to Adrian to continue with the presentation. But obviously I am here to support in terms of further questions that might come for us as we move forward.
Thanks, Neil. So just a few slides now in terms of Calderdale's response to Vision Zero. I think Neil's touched on the strategic group that we've established, and we have lead member representation from Councillor Swift on that group. The governance within Calderdale aligns with the West Yorkshire Vision Zero Board and the Community Safety Partnership. There's strong attendance and positive contribution from partners. And we're taking a very much public health-led approach to Vision Zero as well. So what have we done more recently? Many of you, I'm sure, will be aware that we held a road safety roadshow at the Victoria Theatre, which was attended by over 400 Year 11 and Sixth Form students. We had a range of partners and presentations there, including from bereaved parents, and there was a mock young person's funeral. I think it's fair to say the feedback from the day was that it was pretty hard hitting. But what we're trying to do is get in early and influence the people that are, one, sadly, a high victim group, particularly in terms of pedestrian collisions, but also then go on and be, in terms of drivers, become quite a high risk group in terms of age profile. So that was, from my perspective, and I think the feedback we received, a very positive day, and it's certainly something we would like to do more of moving forwards. Complementing that, again, we've had wider comms campaigns. So before, in the run up to Christmas, we took part in the Brakes speed campaign, again reflecting on some of the contributory factors to some of the higher profile collisions that we'd seen. We've also run a road safety campaign, a winter road safety campaign, apologies, and I guess the image at the bottom of the gentleman in his car is a YouTube video that we're currently promoting, which is from West Yorkshire Police around drug driving and the issues around there. But we're not, while those are some of the campaigns that we've done and currently done, we're also looking ahead to the spring and intend to have a campaign around lower speeds around schools, and also there's plans for more generally a Vision Zero campaign, which will be part of and support. Perhaps a little bit more specific now by way of using an example in terms of safer roads, and I think this will link nicely to the item on highway maintenance shortly. But we get a lot of requests for interventions on the highway, again coming back to that concern and the profile of road safety within communities. We have to find some way of assessing those requests and prioritising that work, and really that is largely data intelligence led, but the solutions can range from, at the upper end, quite large and complex solutions to sometimes quite simple yet still effective. So the example that I just wanted to talk through very briefly was the junction at Sowood, where there was a persistent history of damage only and slight injury collisions at a giveaway priority junction. So what that means is we hadn't had any fatalities, thankfully, or serious injuries, but we did have this picture of multiple near misses and damage only collisions. On reviewing the site, there was a bus stop that was obscuring the giveaway sign. There was a poor road surface. There was worn lining, poor signage, and limited visibility due to field walls. Working with our engineers, we were able to relocate the bus stop. We were able to resurface with a high skid resistant material. We were able to put down some higher spec lining, and we repeated the slow markings on the through road, and we changed the junction from priority giveaway to a stop with high visibility new signs. While that work has only recently been completed, to date we've had no further reported collisions, which is clearly a really positive result. And I'm now going to ask Derek to come in and talk me through the last few slides in terms of the work, some of the work that he's been leading on.
Thank you, Adrian, and good evening, everybody. Derek Ben, Calderdale's Community Safety Partnerships Manager. Typical for Calderdale, and I suppose with most other areas, but certainly in Calderdale, engaging with communities, engaging with young people, schools, etc., is really paramount in terms of how we can drive down the number of serious killed and serious injuries. Apologies, I've just got a notice saying for some reason my battery is about to go low, and yet it's still showing as full. So just bear with me a second. This is not a guess out, Adrian. So we do a lot of work around schools. We engage with schools. We also don't do that just, how shall I say, in isolation. We do expect a lot of support from schools and parents and governors. And I'm sure that if you think back, councillors, to the schools in your areas, you will see the work that goes on working with partners with the police, with parking services, with public health around school engagement, and obviously trying to ensure that schools are a safe place to also drop off and pick children up at key times. By the nature of some of these schools, some of the schools were not always designed with road safety in mind. So this is seen as a really important element of our prevention. In terms of working there, like I say, we really do emphasize the engagement, but we also don't shy away from taking enforcement. Unfortunately, there are still a minority that will still offload and alight people from vehicles in quite dangerous positions. So although we do go in there with a very friendly and an engaging type of action, we don't hesitate from enforcement. And I think that what we do ask from schools is that they also communicate the concerns they've got. So Adrian, if I could just move on, please, and hope my battery doesn't go. So talked a bit about school streets. This is taking a little bit further the work around schools. This is making certain areas of schools, and I talked about the fact that a lot of schools weren't designed with road safety in mind, and we can't always think about where schools are situated. You know, are they always in the safest place in terms of preventing collisions or injuries? So one of the things that we have done is we've actually made sterile areas around school streets, and this is what we're working with, and we're looking to increase that number. We've got 16 school streets in place. There is a process to go through that's very much led by public health and our road safety partnership group, and we've got more schools wishing to join the scheme. So again, a positive sign that people want to make a difference, and it's really encouraging, because without their support, no matter what we do as partners or statutory agencies, it is the community and that peer pressure. And this for me leads us on to the Community Speed Watch. This for me is a fantastic opportunity. Not only does it provide information about speeding in areas which then informs deployment, and I'll come on to Operation Ormill very shortly and other activities we have around enforcement. But I think for me, actually, it's quite sobering. And I think some of us have obviously seen, or many of us have actually seen, people from within our own communities out there, often in not very pleasant conditions, attempting to sort of put that seed into people's mind and putting that consciousness out about actually you need to slow down. And I know we've done quite a lot over the years around the 20 miles an hour egg thing. For me, though, seeing people from your own locality doing something of this nature, for me, is a really powerful message. If I could just move on.
I'm afraid your things are frozen.
I think we've possibly lost Derek.
We've lost him for a moment.
So I'm happy to speak to his last slide, and then we can move on to questions after that, and hopefully Derek will be able to rejoin us.
Hopefully so. Yeah, thank you, Adrian. That'd be great.
It's okay. So Operation Hormill is operation run by the police, but funded by the district. It's an incredibly effective, enhanced policing operation, and targeting specific areas that we've identified, working with partners, working with elected members. And some of the results, I think that Derek's got on the screen there. That so I'm just checking I've got the date so I don't mislead anyone. But we saw on the 13th of November that Operation Hormill was deployed in Boothtown and South Alram. And in terms of outputs of that, there were 2 vehicles seized for no insurance, one no seatbelt, one for no registration documents. And there was one court summons for speeding and 1 arrest for racially aggravated public order. So again, if Derek rejoins us, I hope he'll be able to give you a bit more detail about Operation Hormill, but this is certainly something that we're keen to continue, and we see as, again, what Neil referred to in terms of the pillars of Vision Zero, and the feedback we get from communities, they want to see an enhanced enforcement and police presence, and this is very much part of that. So that brings us to the end of the presentation on Vision Zero. If people are happy, I'll stop sharing the presentation so I can see people again, and myself, Neil, and others, if necessary, will happily answer any questions members may have.
Thank you for that, gentlemen. Just as we return to, I can see everybody as well now. Over to members for any questions and comments, please. If you can use the raise hand function, you will automatically come up to my top left-hand corner so I can list you in order for the questions. Yes, thank you very much indeed. First off, under the gun is Councillor Foster. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought I'd better chip in, as it was me that asked for this item agenda. Firstly, thank you very much for the presentation, for the information you brought with you tonight. I think it's a hugely sobering thing, actually, that we have so many people killed and seriously injured on our roads, and immensely frustrating that standards of driving are so poor that we still have that amount of accidents that devastate people's lives, because that's what they do. You lose any member of family, or you have a serious injury in a road traffic collision, that is life-changing. It's life-changing not just for the person injured, but for the family as well. And I think I don't know what we do to get this through people's head. When I mean, the road outside my house is a 20-mile-an-hour zone. The amount of cars I see whizzing up there at speeds way more than 20 miles an hour is incredibly frustrating. Because I know, I mean, we've had a dog knocked down and killed there, 11, 12 years ago. That was bad enough. But one day it's going to be a child. There's a nursery on that road. It's going to be a child that's killed. Cars are bigger. SUVs, you cannot see a small child from the driving position. You just can't. It's the way they're designed. And there's more and more SUVs on the road. They are more, and it seems to me, I mean, I don't know whether there's any statistical fact with this or not, probably not, but it seems to me the bigger the vehicle, the worse the driving. That's kind of the impression I get, and that's no comment on anybody that, I mean, I know, Regan, you drive a van for work. I mean, that's no reflection on any specific person's driving skills, but I'm sure you've all sort of seen a similar thing, that, the bigger the vehicle, the more they feel they can push in and drive in a manner that is not completely courteous to everybody else, never mind safely. So it's extremely frustrating. I just wanted to raise a couple of things. Firstly, what can we do to make sure that drivers prioritise pedestrians? How can we prioritise pedestrians? We've got Rule H, it's in the highway code. From the standard of driving I see on the roads in Calderdale sometimes and elsewhere, it's just as bad in other places. I would be very surprised if most of the drivers have even heard of the highway code, never mind anything about Rule H. It's just awful. Rule H is the rule that says it's the hierarchy. It's the pedestrians first, then it prioritises vulnerable road users over people with four wheels and a tin box. So how can we have a campaign to say that actually pedestrians are not targets, cyclists are not targets, they're legitimate road users and should be treated as such? So that's my first frustrated question. I'm sorry, there is a lot of frustration in this, and I apologize for that, but it's incredibly difficult that we are still losing so many people on our roads. Second, the event in the Victoria Theatre, hugely valuable. I attended when I was mayor. I'm sure, Howard, you did too. I think all councillors should have the opportunity to attend that. If that's not something already, I can't remember whether I've seen it from other sources other than just when I was mayor. But it's slightly frustrating that there were only 400 Year 11s there. because I know that there's an awful lot more than 400 year 11s in Calderdale. I mean, there's 150 or so in my son's year, so that's less than 3 schools worth. So what can we do to promote that as a resource for year 11s, and because it is really valuable. And I know it's, you know, we're talking to people who aren't yet driving, but actually, if we can drum some sense into just a handful of teenagers, then it's worth it. It's worth it. If we even save one life through that, it's worth every penny. So that's my second question. And the third thing I wanted to raise was a very fortuitous conversation that my husband had this afternoon while I was out walking the dog. He bumped into Bev Goff, who, with her husband Steve, are founders of the Naomi Cherry Goff Foundation. Naomi Goff, I believe, and I literally got home from work, he presented me with the leaflets, and I haven't had a chance to double check, but I believe she's the young lady that died on the flyover as you head up towards Bluetown a few years ago. And they've set up a foundation in her name, and they are trying to promote road safety. So what can the council do to work with foundations like the Naomi Cherry Goff Foundations and any others in Calderdale that are working on a similar platform? Because any way we can get the message out that speed is not good, that the fatal 5 are indeed fatal, anything we can do to even save one life has got to be worth it. Thank you. And sorry, that was a bit of a rambling, passionate, kind of frustrated epilogue, but it's something that's really worries me. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Foster. I mean, bearing in mind it was you who asked to bring this to scrutiny, I think you're entitled to a bit of a rant. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. But yeah, you're right. It's that passion. So 3 questions there. If Adrian, if you want to have a go at, or your colleagues want to have a go at addressing those.
Yeah, no, certainly happy to respond and bring in colleagues as required. I think the first point and question that you raise, Councillor, is in respect to how do we make drivers. Well, I think the example you used was perhaps respect pedestrians and cyclists, but I think probably really that is probably a proxy really, and how do we get to and influence that small minority of drivers that will not respect the speed limit if we reduce it, that will continue to drive inappropriately and dangerously, that will not necessarily think twice about stepping into a vehicle if they're under the influence of drink and drug. And that's a really hard question to answer. There's a lot of focus, quite rightly, on the council and other partners. What can we do to make roads safer? Why can't we reduce the speed of traffic or the volume of traffic? Why can't the police have more presence on the roads? Why can't they do more enforcement? But sadly, there'll always be that element, of people who do not respect and adhere to the rules and the driving conditions. So that's why I think some of the work we're doing around the comms and engagement campaigns is really important, because what we're trying to do is influence behaviour. And one of the reasons, you're quite right, that the event at the Vic is so important, and some of the messaging we try to get out through the campaigns that we do is, sadly, again, I think the people we're trying to target probably will not be that receptive to some of those campaigns. But what we're trying to do actually is target their friends and family, target the people that may well be sat in the car as passengers, to target the people who may have influence over those people to reduce those speeds. But it's a really, really difficult problem, and one that I don't have all the solutions to or answers to, and we're just going to have to keep working at it. But I do think more work with young people will ultimately start to bear some results. And that probably leads on to the event at the Victoria Theatre. And again, I thank you for your feedback. I think it is a great event. I've said a few times we'd like to do more events of that nature. We'd like to do more engagement with schools. And I think your question was, how could we do more or get more people there? And that probably comes down to resource and budget. So if we want to do more, we need to allocate the resources across the partners and the budget to do more engagement. I don't think we're going back to a space where we'll be attending individual schools. I don't think that's something that we would be able to service, but there may also be other creative ways where we can collate lesson plans or assembly packs, which will allow us to reach out further through the schools to deliver some of those messages. But again, those are conversations we're having across the partners to see what more we can do. And lastly, you talked about the foundation set up and how they can link in, or how we can link with them. And I might bring in Neil here, but the Riz and Derek, but there are forums where other organisations can get involved. There's lots of people interested in this space, and I think Vision Zero is pretty inclusive in that respect. And I think what we're trying to get others to carry the message, and we're trying to get feedback from other parties who work in this area, because we know we can't do it by ourselves. But I'll perhaps look to Neil or Derek to say a little bit more on that.
Yeah, more than happy to. And what is very interesting is when you speak about the Naomi Sherry Goff Foundation, I actually went and I sat with Steve Goff personally last week. I've actually got 2 of the leaflets right in front of me here. It is something that I do try and do as part of my role within Vision Zero. And having spoken with Steve at length around it, there is a lot of opportunity for us. Steve does go into schools himself. And the foundation deliver to full days in certain schools, getting to 150 to 200 children each day when they go in. And that is something that I think we can support across West Yorkshire, to be honest. And in terms of the delivery, there is a delivery group in West Yorkshire that Calderdale are strongly represented on by one of Adrian's team. And there are opportunities to actually get further training out into schools through West Yorkshire rather than just Calderdale. And that is something that I certainly do support. When I was listening to Councillor Foster speaking initially, she actually hit all of the pillars of Vision Zero within what she's referring to as a rant, but I don't see it as a rant. I see it as something very, very positive in terms of the fact that we have got a structure that we can now work to in terms of Vision Zero. And for me, it is key that we are working with all opportunities. I do know in terms of the Victoria Theatre event, the Naomi Sherry Goff Foundation was actually present there because Steve even spoke with me about it and was very, very keen to sort of work in the future. He's keen to work with MPs. I was actually down at Parliament on Tuesday looking to push the Vision Zero agenda, and one of the Calderdale MPs was actually the person who had facilitated that for us in Holly Lynch. So for me, we are doing an awful lot to move things forward. There's a lot of work to do, but we can get out to a lot of people, particularly pedestrians, in terms of understanding various elements around road safety, but equally all road users, because we all have that equal responsibility to look after each other whilst we're out there.
Thank you for that. I'd like to bring in Derek Ben, if I may, before I come to Councillor Brundell's question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It was to follow on that conversation. And I suppose I always see this as an opportunity to sort of get feedback from members and the public if they are listening and participating, because I think for me, Vision Zero is a real step change. I think we cannot underestimate just how different this is from the traditional approaches. And I think there's got to be an acceptance that although some of the traditional approaches have worked, they haven't worked well enough. And I think we need to accept that. And so my ask really of councillors is how are we maximising the opportunity through the ward forums? Do we service the ward forums well enough in terms of road safety information, bringing information to you, because Adrian's absolutely right. There's limited resources. We've got to be smart. And yet the ward forum is something, isn't it, that is there in the ward. It's with local people. And Adrian and I, we had this conversation about the campaigns, and we said, what do we need to do? We're not going to get to that person who's so reckless that they drive with no due regard. We're going to try and get to their peer group. We're going to try and get into the families that can influence them, the mothers, the fathers who pay for some of the vehicles often, etc. So I think for me, I'd certainly like to hear, councillor, not in this forum, but please contact myself and I can take it to our Vision Zero, is if you feel there's missed opportunities. I do know that there are conversations at ward forums. I do know we've attended a number and we've presented at those. What I'm quite keen to hear is, did we do it well enough? And actually, did we do it with the spirit of Vision Zero, in terms of not just the traditional people going along and talking about road safety, but actually are we doing what we say we're doing, and we're actually adopting a new approach? So that would be my ask. And like I say, please just drop me an email if you feel there's anything that we can do better at those forums, because they are in the heart of communities and it's a really good way to get our message across. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I also find the well, for me at least, the Lower Valley Safer, Cleaner, Greener team meetings very useful, because I often collate issues that have arisen during the course of it. You know, things like, and impacts of Operation Hormill, I think, can't be understated as well. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Operation Hormill, I have to say. But yeah, some ward forums like Rastrick, for example, they're not terribly well attended. So I find the Lower Valley Safer, Cleaner, Greener team meeting a useful forum for that. So it can be fed through that way, I suppose, Derek. So, but yeah, moving on quickly then. Councillor Brundle, please. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone involved in that presentation. It was really insightful. Hopefully you can hear me. I didn't have time to get home before the meeting. A couple of questions. So firstly, you mentioned the very sobering number of, it costs 2.5 million for each fatal accident. I think it's something we often neglect to think about when we focus on the human cost, rightly so. I was just wondering, in terms of that figure, I imagine a lot of that is emergency services, but I was wondering what else sort of comes into that, because like I said, I think it's quite a shocking amount. So that'd be just sort of interesting to know. Secondly, I know members have mentioned before, but I think geographically we have the issue around here that we have a lot of areas where a national speed limit on a country lane goes, you know, very abruptly into a 30, say. And actually what you find is there's that huge lag because people don't start braking until the 30 sign, and it takes them a while to slow down from, you know, up to 60 from that. Is that something that's particularly being looked at, specifically in terms of that risk? Because like I say, I know there's bits in my ward, I know other members have mentioned it with that rural geography we have, that quite often that seems to be quite a risk factor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brundle.
I think it would help if I came in on that, Chair.
Yes, with pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of the figures, the figures are actually quoted from the Department for Transport, and you are quite right, they do involve elements like the emergency services, they involve elements around road closures, they involve elements, unfortunately, around the coronial process, mortuaries, etc. There's a whole host of elements that all contribute to that sort of figure, but sometimes it's also the knock-on effect in terms of the NHS for recuperative work as well, in terms of the family and the mental impact that it has had. So there's a significant number of elements that form part of that. The details can be found within the DFT website around the breakdowns of it. In terms of the speed, again, perhaps Adrian might want to come in further on this, but we are using a lot of technology to try and support the work that we are doing. And within West Yorkshire and obviously Calderdale does have this. We use a speed compliance tool to understand a little bit more about certain lengths of roads and speeds on those. So there's elements of technology that we're using to understand the picture more so that we can do something about it.
Lovely. Thank you. I hope that answers your question, Councillor Brundle.
It does. Thank you. That was useful.
Thank you. Councillor Caffrey.
Thank you, Chair. When the first slide went up, it did mention the number of fatalities and serious injuries. I'm not sure how many was it, I can't remember. But I've noticed, it says in the narrative here that the actual number of accidents in that category has gone up by 16.9% since 2019, which seems a lot. I guess 20 and 21 are just not included because they're not realistic, but that does seem a lot. I just wondered, I know it's not exact science, but do we have statistics on what causes these accidents? I mean, does it involve bikes, vans, cars, lorries? Is it pedestrians? The statistics might help us address it, and particularly locations as well, rather than just the sort of the numbers. I guess it's a case of drilling down and finding where. Well, it might be across the board, but to find out exactly where the accidents are. I mean, we did spend an awful lot of money a few years ago on 20-mile-an-hour zones. Now, I'm surprised, therefore, the figures are now higher, because I thought it was a major road safety scheme. And we're saying that hasn't worked, or aren't these accidents in residential streets? Are they somewhere else? So it's really a case of trying to find a pattern as to why we're getting these fatalities and how we address it. And this is something we should look at. I mean, the types of vehicle may make a difference, like, is it vans zipping around, or is it lorries cutting corners off? Or you know what I mean, don't you? Are we drilling down and finding out where these accidents are and how they're caused? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, great question. Thank you.
Again, I'm happy to lead off in terms of that answer and discussion, really, and bring others in as required. But I think in answer to the first part of your question, Councillor Caffrey, which is, how much data do we have? What do we look at? There is lots of data, is what I would say. There is lots of data for Calderdale, for West Yorkshire, nationally, that is looked at from different perspectives, and they drill down into that to look at, was the injured party the driver of a vehicle, the passenger of a vehicle, a pedestrian, a cyclist? They look at age profiles, and all of that feeds into how we've arrived at what are the fatal five, in terms of what are the key contributory factors to collisions and injuries, and all of that feeds into the 5 pillars of Vision Zero in terms of how we hope to address that. What I would caveat around some of the data, and it's always difficult, because I think naturally we want to be evidence-led, and it is essential that we look at the data that we have and try and understand it. But at the same time, if used incorrectly or taken out of context, it can be misleading. So I could have shared a set of numbers for Calderdale, which would have showed quite a significant increase in accidents or in collisions and injuries since pre-COVID levels. Last calendar year on fatalities was a really bad year for Calderdale, and percentage-wise, that would have shown a huge increase on pre-COVID levels. But actually then, when we zoom out and look into that in a bit more detail, last year was still a bad year for Calderdale, but actually we're not significantly out of step with other districts. And if we just focus on fatalities, which are really, really tragic, that's actually quite a small statistical pool. And so by definition, it is sensitive and volatile. So overall, the trend at the moment, sadly, is one of increasing injuries. The reasons for those inform the fatal five. We know we have specific issues around speed, around drink and drug, and around reckless driving. And we also know that when we look across the age groups, that we have an issue around, the type of victim. We have an issue around pedestrians, and we know that we have an issue around young people. And within that, specifically, young boys, and in terms of drivers, young adult males. But there's a lot of data. It's just calibrating that and getting the right advice to help inform what we do.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Blackburn and then Councillor Kimber before. And then Darren. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A few different issues here, and thank you very much for the presentation. Really useful. Likewise, I attended the road safety show. I thought that was absolutely excellent. So I think we could perhaps do a video that's sent to schools on something on that basis. So actually, you know, we don't necessarily have to do a big massive thing at the Victoria Theatre, although it is extremely effective. I was supposed to be near where my parents didn't used to have to wear seatbelts. There were no alcohol limits. There were some hard-hitting campaigns nationally. We are missing those campaigns. We're missing out on younger people actually seeing some of those campaigns, because of course they no longer watch the adverts, no longer watch normal sort of TVs on that instance. There is an element of young people equally being street aware and road aware, because actually a number of young people are on the mobile phones with the headphones on. So there's a balance there as well, where we need to educate and ensure that actually when they are by road, they are actually looking out for vehicles, especially these days with new vehicles and new technology. Of course, there is another issue as well. Whilst predominantly I know it's younger people that are more reckless, shall I say, because they've got these speeding cars and all that sort of stuff. I equally think there is an issue in relation to the aging population and some of the people that shouldn't be on the roads after a certain age, you know, shouldn't be driving. That's perhaps a bigger issue. What else have I just need to cover? Equally, if there's some additional monies, we never got 20 miles an hour zones in Clifton. The village didn't want them at the time, but I don't really now they are crying out, because of course it reduces it from 40 to 30. It might not reduce it to 20, but it does reduce the some of the speed, and some of the worst drivers I see in the big house area coming out of McDonald's on Bradford Road. So those are some of my issues, and I am quite passionate about most things. You know, equally passionate about irresponsible people that drop the children off outside the schools as well. I think there's some irresponsible parenting, and I think that's what needs. There's a few different elements there. So thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'd echo the parking outside school on the yellow zigzags. That's, you know, it's beyond the pale. Any officers want to come back with respect to Councillor Bradbury's comments?
I think perhaps. Oh, go on, Neil. Happy to.
I was going to say happy to come back in, and there are certain elements where I think it's incumbent upon us in terms of Vision Zero in Calderdale and in West Yorkshire to influence some political change at a national level. So you mentioned, for example, the aging population. I'm sure there can be changes around there. One of the key things that we plan to lobby around is the graduated driving licence for young drivers as well. And there are a number of opportunities for us in that space. So yes, certainly elements, but I think we've got a lot of opportunity to influence nationally, actually.
Thank you. I'll bring in Derek before I bring in Councillor Kimber. Councillor Caffrey, would you mind lowering your hand, please, by the way, just before Derek speaks? Thank you, Derek.
Thank you, Chair. I just sort of raised a bit of an eyebrow, because I thought Councillor Bradbury made a great comment there about McDonald's, and I suppose this comes back to resources, doesn't it? You know, and this is not a pitch for additional resources. I wish it was, you know, and I'll be a bit more concise, really. But the thing about it is that's where the target audience is, isn't it? And that's where you can make a real difference. And I'm just thinking about some of the issues we have around McDonald's. You know, for example, down at Saltable, we have the issue about people parking up in the forecourt of the garage, etc. I know your area less well, Councillor Bradbury, but I'm sure that you've got the same issues around there. And it is a really good place to target with engagement and with campaign. And I think that's maybe something we can take away and think about, but it does come back to resources, doesn't it? And again, we just need to make sure that we're being smart. And if that's where the young people are, then let's try and see it as an engagement opportunity, and let's see what we can do. And maybe something, Neil, that we can talk about. I don't know if we've ever really got into collaboration with some of these big businesses that attract young people, and whether that might be something that can be discussed at a West Yorkshire level around partnership working. We've done it with crime, haven't we? We've done it with shoplifting. Actually, why don't we think about it in terms of road safety? And Neil, you know this subject better than I do, so you might come back to me and say straight away we're already doing it, but does seem an opportunity there, certainly, doesn't it, with those types of businesses that do offer an attraction, particularly to the younger driver?
Yeah, I'll come straight in and say it's certainly something that can be considered. I won't say that it's been done as yet, but that doesn't mean it can't be looked at. This is where the delivery group come in across West Yorkshire and how they engage with different businesses, different organisations, and coming back to schools and that side of things. But it does need to be data led as well, and we've got opportunity to use that data. And within West Yorkshire, we are very data rich. So coming back on Councillor Caffrey's point around the data. Yeah, there is an awful lot that we have, and we do understand who is causing harm to who, and also we've got different sets of data, such as fire data, that provides us with that richer picture. But yeah, coming back on the point, I think the key thing is, yes, we can work with anybody who has the opportunity to assist us to reduce killed and seriously injured on our roads, whoever that is. And for me, there is nothing off limits in terms of saving lives, in my opinion.
Thank you. I'd echo Councillor Bradbur's point about McDonald's. Some of the most egregious examples of driving I see are actually families in SUVs, as they seem desperate to get their McDonald's fix, which kind of more suggests to me that it's around planning issues in terms of things like traffic flow modelling in the face of a fast food joint appearing and the traffic difficulties that will be arising as a consequence of that. So I'm wondering if that could be factored into the planning process somehow or another, for further consideration going forward. Just an observation there. Councillor Kimber and then Councillor Wood, and then Councillor Foster, I think, and then I'm just aware of the time passing, and this is a very important issue, so we'll let this run a little bit, but I'd like to be able to move on to the next subject by about 7:15 if possible. Thanks. Councillor Kimber.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the presentation. This is timely. I've got an awful lot going on in my ward at the moment, and being elected from May, I had a fatality in the ward almost immediately. And I have 2 children that have passed their driving test in the last year, and quite frankly, it's frightening. So I've got a couple of points on rural roads. So my ward is predominantly rural, and we have huge issues with speeding. And the police go out quite a lot into the ward, but what they struggle with on the rural routes is being able to place the equipment in order to monitor, or to be in a safe space in order to do that monitoring. And I think the rural routes, it's a massive, massive challenge. And I think people are used to seeing police on the main roads. They get up to the small windy roads which fit one car, and they just put their foot down regardless of any signage or any speed bumps, anything like that. So it's what can we do around those rural routes? Now, my question is around the community speed watch, because in my ward, I've got a really active group, safety group, who are just really, really engaged in this. They want to really make a difference in a really small village where they've had lots of issues. And I want to harness that. I want to understand how that community speed watch works and how we can get the community involved in the safety of our roads and how they can disseminate that information to people. I just think it's just paramount, really, that we do get the community involved in the best way possible. So that's my 2 points there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adrian, shall I do the speed watch one? Yeah. So first and foremost, it's great to hear that. And yes, it's been challenging times since your appointment or election, should I say, Councillor Kimber in that area. I can assure you that that information is used. So the information is passed into our road safety partnership group. That information is looked at and it's an indication, and we risk assess it. And if we see speeds that are far in excess of what they should be, and that's where local knowledge comes in as well, because obviously just doing 5-10 miles an hour in those areas can be really treacherous and reckless. So what we do is we look at the information, and that then determines often the deployment around Operation Ormill and the neighbourhood policing, and also our community safety wardens, as well as some of the traditional road safety work that we do. Yes, there's probably more we can do. And certainly for me, we have a road safety partnership group, and I'd certainly like to feel it's inclusive. So if anybody wants to come to that meeting and sit within that meeting and just see some of the conversations that are taking place, I'm sure that can be arranged, because I think what you'll get from attending is seeing how we use the information, how we then decide on how we deploy our resources. And I think so many times, I think Adrian said it, Neil said it, and members have said it as well, we do need to be smart around those resources. So it's great to hear that there's an active group, and I certainly would want to know if that active group doesn't feel like it's being supported, because we do put a lot of work into supporting speed groups. We'd like to do more, but I welcome that. So if anybody does have an interest and would like to be involved, I'm sure I can arrange that, and we can have an input from the Road Safety Partnership Group.
Thank you, Derek. Appreciate that. Councillor,
would you like to on the second part of the question, Chair?
So, yes, thank you. Appreciate that, Neil.
No problem. So the other part of the question is what we can do about speeding in rural areas more generally. And for me, one of the key things to be aware of is the deployment of safety cameras in West Yorkshire. They changed their deployment strategy back in March of last year. It is on the Safety Camera Partnership website, but what that allows for is what are called community sites of concern. So the community can flag up a site of concern that would then get looked at with a view to mobile enforcement going into that area. And that is certainly something that I would advocate looking at, and happy to speak with you directly about that if necessary. Anybody more than willing to take any communication from anybody around that to go through the process with you.
No, I appreciate that. The problem that we often, when we ask for mobile enforcement, is the local topography doesn't lend itself to it. I mean, have things changed at all in that regard to enable that to be done?
Well, it depends. Obviously, each site would be based on certain elements of topography. But if there is an opportunity, and it's not always exactly the same types of van that we've always had, there's been some changes that have been made to allow us to be more dynamic in the way that we use safety enforcement cameras. So yeah, there's certain things I can obviously discuss more at length. I could go into the detail, but I'm conscious of time for you. But yeah, clearly we are keen to ensure that we are moving this forward, because we want to work on the rural areas as well as the urban areas.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate what you're saying. I was thinking of some of the roads in my ward, and a mobile van wouldn't fit, quite frankly. but there we go. Councillor Wood.
Hello. Thank you again for the presentation. Quick one from me. I just wondered what, from a prevention perspective, what we can do about reclassifying some rural roads, because particularly, I know certainly in my ward, and I know a lot of the Calderdale wards, we've got roads which are effectively national speed limit, but have gradually become residential streets. So there are roads where, there's tight bends, houses on both sides, perhaps new developments that haven't been taken into account, and we've still got 60 mile per hour roads that are completely unsuitable, but with obviously there's no enforcement you could do because people aren't speeding. They're within the letter of the law, even though in this case the speed limit is grossly inappropriate. I just wondered if there's anything we can, if there any string to pull there, or is that some part of your agenda? Thank you.
Thank you.
I can perhaps answer some of that and again bring others in. Apologies, I'm struggling to find out how to raise my hand in Zoom, but so I think that what you've touched on there, really, Councillor, again, is this issue of is the road safe? Is the speed limit safe? And we get a lot of requests to look at particular junctions or crossing points or speed limits or transitions between speed limits. We have to work with the network that we have, and some of our roads are not what we cannot be or could not be built to current standards. The issue I think you've highlighted is where perhaps the use of that the population or the build-up of that road has changed over time. So again, that can be looked at. But again, any change that we need to do needs to be looked at and prioritised using the evidence that we have. In terms of speed limits, again, that we would reduce a speed limit if it could be shown that is being consistently exceeded and it's not suitable for that road. But if we arbitrarily reduced speed limits, that would not be supported. And I look to Neil here as a former police officer, but that would not be supported by the police in terms of enforcement. And again, as we've discussed so many times already, unfortunately, even where we do reduce speed limits or make changes, that will probably not be adhered to by the small minority that is causing the majority of the collisions that we're seeing.
I feel that at least he's sending the right message, though, right? If something drops from 60 to 30 as it goes past a bunch of houses, that's got to be better than just leaving it as an natural speed limit, right? That's got to, improve matters.
I would in principle agree that if
do we have to wait for an accident to make that happen, or is that something that we can start to, can you put, for instance, the strips down to kind of monitor how fast people actually do drive, and then look at the topography and go, well, that's 55 mile an hour down this road isn't suitable for this road, or do we have to wait for an actual collision?
So the data set that we have is largely around collisions. We do then have now a wider sort of suite of information in terms of near misses and feedback from community feedback from members, but clearly that isn't as that's not necessarily comprehensive kind of data. We do a lot of work in terms of speed tubes and looking at average speeds in certain areas. The issue that we have then becomes one of capacity and our ability to respond to all of the requests that my service, and I think we've got Bonner and Steve Smith on the call, and their teams get, which requires a lot of analysis of design engagement before we can introduce any change, whether that's a reduction in speed limit or other measures. And that's a really difficult message for me to give. But that is one of the challenges that we have in terms of looking at the network and the amount of requests that we get.
Great stuff. Does that answer your question for you, Dan? Councillor Wood?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Okay,
thank you. Councillor Foster?
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me a second chance to speak. I just wanted to agree with Councillor Wood about the total nonsensical nature of some of the speed limits, and the fact that they just are completely inappropriate for the place that they now are. And to remind everyone that the speed limit is a limit, not a target. And if we could get that message across a little bit more, maybe that would help, because you should be driving to the conditions of the road, not to the speed limit. And that is something that is in the highway code, if anybody ever bothered to read the wretched thing, which they don't, because we know that they don't after they've passed the test. So yeah, it's really, really frustrating, but I know there's all sorts of hurdles that we have to jump through, like not least traffic TROs, which take forever and a day and cost a lot of money. But also in Vision Zero, one of the first thing is that deaths are preventable, and surely we should be looking to prevent accidents, not react. We shouldn't be reacting to deaths. We should be looking at preventing them and preventing serious injuries in the first place. And anything that we can do to do that would be really valuable. So perhaps one way of doing it would be to actually review all the speed limits in Calderdale. Okay, where we've got 20 miles an hour, probably that doesn't need looking at, but where we've got chunks of road that go from 40 to 30 to 40 to 30, should that just be 30 the whole way through? Well, those sorts of things, if we can, we've got a lot of roads in Calderdale. It's going to be really, really difficult to do the whole lot, but certainly in one go, that would be impossible. But if there is any ways where we can look at roads where we know there's a problem and say, right, okay, well, we'll do a traffic regulation order for the whole road and just make the whole thing 30, or from point A to point B, sort of being 5 miles apart. I don't know how possible that would be, but that seems to me a logical starting point to look at. Actually, we need to be preventing. We need to be proactive, not reactive, where people's lives are concerned. The other thing I'd really, really like us to do something about is blinking pavement parking, which shoves pedestrians out into the middle of oncoming traffic. And it happens all the time. And people value their wing mirrors far more than they value lives. It's particularly difficult if you use a wheelchair or have a child in a buggy or anything along those lines. You are shoved out into the middle of the road. If you can't squeeze between that vehicle and the wall that it's parked next to, well, good luck to you, because that's the way that car drivers seem to think. So, in where we know that there's hot spots for pavement parking, is there some sort of signage that we can put up that would deter people from parking? Sort of three people got tickets for parking on the pavement in this location in the last month. Do you want to be the next one? That sort of thing. Can we look at some sort of innovative way to make sure that pavements are actually for pedestrians, particularly where it's alongside faster roads or busier roads, because that would really help. It's not necessarily going to, I don't know of any specific accidents that are affected by that are a result of that, but you get people out of cars by making them feel safer to walk, and you get them to feel safer to walk by making sure there's actually somewhere for them to walk without having to dodge obstacles and parked vehicles on the pavement. So if we can look at some sort of innovation around that, maybe we'll actually get fewer people in the cars to cause the accidents in the first place. I don't know, I'm thinking off the top of my head, but it would be really good to do that. And my final point, we've talked a lot about young people. It's not just young people who are bad drivers. There's plenty of people who would perhaps fall under the category of middle-aged or older, and that could really do with a bit of education with their driving. So perhaps some of the bigger businesses in the area might welcome a visit. I don't know. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. I'd have to take issue with some of what you say about pavement parking, because the resulting gap might not be enough to let a fire engine through. But do any officers want to come back on some of the other points that Councillor Foster raised? In fact, even that one as well, actually, because it is an issue.
Yeah, happy to respond. I think I'll respond perhaps first to the last point about it's not just young drivers. Absolutely not. Again, the data suggests that we sadly people are hurt and injured across all age groups, across all demographics, and in terms of drivers responsible for those collisions, likewise. But we do definitely have hotspots around certain demographics. Pavement parking is a huge issue, not just for road safety. It's an issue for through traffic, public transport. It's an issue for other road users, cyclists, etc. It's something we're very aware of, and we are taking steps to tackle. Enforcement is very difficult. And again, I might need to bring in colleagues to help me on this, but the council doesn't have the powers to issue penalty notices for pavement parking, and actually, I think that's the police. But to actually gather the evidence to kind of issue a fine for pavement parking is also not straightforward. You have to demonstrate that someone's creating obstruction. The solution to that is to double yellow line the road and to remove parking altogether. And again, we certainly have done that and are looking to do that in a number of key locations. But clearly, there are very strong feelings on both sides of the argument when we're looking at those sort of measures. And what we need to make sure is that we're not displacing an issue from one location to another location and actually creating more issues there. So again, like everything, sadly, that all of these measures need to be looked at very carefully. But in principle, I absolutely agree that people should not be parking on the pavement. Pavements are for pedestrians, and where it's a shared space, other users. Again, unfortunately, a lot of our network isn't particularly wide, so doesn't actually lend itself to parking on the highway and allowing for free flow and safe flow of traffic. So that is why, again, we are looking at removing parking from a number of locations.
Right, thank you for that. I'm aware that it's 18 minutes past. Councillor Caffrey, is it a quick one? Because I'm going to have to embargo my own questions by the look of it.
It's very quick. Just on the pavement parking, I commissioned a report about 5 years ago on this. It went through Cabinet, it went through Scrutiny. We had a public meeting about it. Well, it was at the Scrutiny meeting. People from the blind school came, CETA, the police, ambulance drivers. If you want the papers, you can have them. I mean, nothing's changed since then. But the reasons it was never enforced were for the reasons that have already been mentioned. You wouldn't get your recycling done in some places, and I'm not agreeing with it, but with some concern about whether it's actually illegal or not. And apparently, it's not illegal as long as you're not causing obstruction. So you can have the stuff if you want it. Even though it's old, it's still relevant today because the roads haven't changed. Thanks, Chair.
Appreciate that, yeah, and thank you for the offer. It might come in useful. But if let one of the officers come for that one, if that's any good to you.
Just
rather than reinvent the wheel, you can have the stuff that's already been done.
Councillor Caffrey, I could recall the papers, and I think everybody's spot on with what they say about pavement parking. It's complex. I think those are really good issues to discuss at Safer, Cleaner, Greener meetings and in ward forums, because without wishing to displace the responsibility on the police, and the police have got to evidence obstruction, there are things we can look at. I think for me, every area is a little bit unique around this, and I think you can't suddenly say this is what we'll introduce. So I think for me it's a perfect conversation to have at Safer, Cleaner, Greeners and say this is a priority for us, it's a concern. We know that in some areas it does create tremendous issues around safety. So I do think if we have those conversations at local forums and through the Safer, Cleaner, Greener, that will then allow us to look at the nuances just a little bit around those particular issues.
No, that's a great point, actually. Would you agree with that, Peter?
Yeah, fine. I mean, yeah. It's it's been raised before, and it's a very valid point. But there's no.
It certainly would run for a days of action. You know, the days of actions were just recently done. I think for me, we're talking about the continuation of those days of action and giving each of the areas a period of time where they can decide what they want to do, how they want to do it. So I think for me, that might be something that we can all then discuss and actually work out what will our response be around engagement, education and enforcement.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm sorry about this. I do have to ask one question, and it's been flagged up by Councillor Issett, who raised it in council about the 3 deaths that have occurred recently in her ward. She's saying that work should have been done on the junction, or should have started last week, but it hasn't happened. It's been scheduled. The question really is, in terms of timescales really, in terms of having identified a hotspot, especially where there's been fatalities, and between initiating the work, I suppose, to begin, and the timescales in terms of initiation and delivery. Are they variable? What are the criteria? Because you used the example of up at Sowood. How long did it take for a decision to be made from was there a critical mass of accidents before action was taken to make those amendments at the junction there, and what sort of timescales were involved, and are these made any quicker in the face of our road traffic collisions? And that will be the last question before we move on to the next subject. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I guess the simple answer is that there are no prescriptive timescales in terms of the work programme that the traffic team and others looking at some of these road safety measures have. We've talked a little bit about, so apologies, what I should have said, I think, as part of my response to Councillor Wood, was we do have a system to receive requests for safety measures, whether that's traffic calming or speed reduction. That would then be programmed into our forward look, and that is periodically prioritised in terms of the information that we have, based on site visits and officer knowledge. But as I've said a few times, unfortunately, that is a long list, and limited capacity does mean that we can only address so many of these schemes at a time. And then funding also, once measures have been identified, funding has to become available. I think the specifics around the issue that Councillor Issett has raised, we've had quite a lot of correspondence on that, and I do believe that while it's been, I wasn't aware the work was meant to start this week and it's been delayed, but I know that work is programmed and will happen, and there are lots of things that have happened in that area to improve road safety. But in other areas, it's very much an issue of identifying a location, assessing and prioritising, the need, and then programming that in based on the capacity of the team to look at that, and also the available funding.
Right, excellent. Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'd like to thank you, Adrian. I'd like to thank Derek, and I'd like to thank. Hang on a second, where's he disappeared to now? Sorry about this. Neil. There you are, Neil, top right hand corner. I'd like to say thank you very much indeed for coming along tonight and presenting and talking with us. Yeah, we've overrun quite a long way on that, but it is an important subject, obviously, and very clearly passions run deep on this one, especially, I think Councillor Foster said a lot for all of us, really. So thank you very much indeed, and I'm sure we shall speak again in the future. But in the meantime, I'd like to move on, if I may, please, to the next part of the agenda, which is the highways maintenance report, please. Is that you? It's you again, isn't it, Adrian?
It is me again.
Right, perfect, thank you.
Bear with me, I will try again to share my screen. It's this one. Oh, share, apologies. Okay. So again, I'll just look for a quick thumbs up to check that I'm sharing the correct screen and people are looking at cover sheets, say highway maintenance. That's great. I'll just try and cancel something over here. Oh no, it's gone away. Oh. I think while we spent a lot of time on road safety, I think actually it fits really nicely with highway maintenance, and actually I think some of the questions that would have, if we'd gone first with highway maintenance, that would have come up, we may have already covered, so hopefully we can gain some time back. I'm going to start by giving a brief overview of how we manage the highway network, of some of the funding that we have available to us, of how we prioritise that work, and some of the challenges that we face. In advance of this meeting, we were asked in particular to prepare, perhaps to talk about potholes and how we address potholes, and also the traffic regulation orders and how that process works. But the way I've structured the presentation is I will pause after the overview to take questions at that point, Chair. And if we start to touch on potholes or traffic regulation orders, that may be then the time to bring in Jonathan to talk about potholes, or myself again to speak a little bit more about traffic regulation orders to answer those questions. So let's check this is working. So again, the council has a statutory duty under the Highways Act to maintain the public network in a condition that is safe for all users. And when we talk about the public network, what we mean by that is all adopted roads, footpaths, verges and associated assets, but it does not include unadopted or privately owned roads. The highway network is the council's largest and most valuable asset. The current replacement cost of the network is about 3.65 billion, excluding land costs. And clearly it provides a really essential role for the council and its residents and communities, provide access to jobs, services, school and healthcare, and is inextricably linked to the council's corporate vision and priorities. Just to give a little flavour for the scale of the network, we have about 1,300 kilometres of roads, 1,100 kilometres of footways, and 1,400 kilometres of public rights of way. And within that network, again, this is just for demonstration purposes, really, because there are a lot more assets than these, but we have 39,000 gullies, 283 highway bridges, 730 kilometres of roads, 31,000 street lights, 20,000 street signs. So how does that, I'll just move that window. So the funding for highway maintenance is split between revenue and capital. And the reason I'm joined today by Jonathan from Green Space and Street Scene is that the funding is also split across two services, public services and strategic infrastructure. So you can see here, I'll go into a little more detail in a minute, that there is about £1 million of revenue for green spaces and street scenes, about 4.6 million for strategic infrastructure. And we also have access to capital funding from the combined authority for highway maintenance. And last year, we also benefited from the announcement of the pothole fund of nearly £800,000. So how's that broken down? Well, I've mentioned already that some of that money is for green spaces and street scenes, and the reasons for that is that they have the operational staff that help maintain the network on a day-to-day basis and carry out emergency repairs to the network as required. And for Calderdale, that's 8 gangs of 2 operatives, so 16 FTEs, and that funding pays for those staff members and also the associated plant and materials required to carry out those repairs. In terms of revenue funding for my service, which is strategic infrastructure, that's 4.56 million, and that funding is nominally split between what we call revenue maintenance controlled budget of just over £1 million and other costs uncontrolled budget of just over £3.5 million. So the revenue maintenance is all reactive urgent repairs to the network, and that includes such things as patching potholes, which is more extensive repairs to walls and bridges, managing our green assets, replacing signs and bollards and cracked guardrails, renewing road markings and linings, gully cleansing, drainage work, and attendance and maintenance of street lighting assets. And then this is the breakdown of that controlled budget. So while the bottom line is just over £1 million, when you break it down by some of the individual activities, you can see actually that the funding against each of those is pretty modest. The largest line within the controlled maintenance funding is the routine maintenance of gullies and drains at nearly £500,000. And then we obviously have other allocations against some of the other work that gets carried out on the network. The other element then of revenue funding within my service is what we call the uncontrolled maintenance activities, and that's because these costs are fixed or dictated by agreement, contract, or policy. And the best and most significant examples of that are probably street lighting and winter service. So, for example, we have a policy around winter service that dictates what we do when certain trigger levels are reached, but ultimately the cost of delivering that service is dictated by the weather. So it's out of our control. We have to maintain to the policy because that's essential for demonstrating that we're managing the network in a safe manner, but how much we spend is a function of the weather. Likewise, street lighting. We've seen phenomenal increases in energy costs in recent years. We have lighting infrastructure that comes on, when a certain light threshold is reached, and turns off in a morning again when a certain light threshold is reached. But the cost of running that service is very much dictated by the cost of energy. So those are two huge budget lines within my service that are dictated by policy or contract, but largely dictated by factors outside of our control. And here we can see that breakdown. So we have 4 funding lines under the sort of uncontrolled heading. One is a contribution to the Leeds Urban Traffic Control Room. The other is the festive lighting, street lighting, festive lighting, and winter service. And you can see that between street lighting and winter service, they account for nearly over £3 million of that £3.5 million budget. So in addition to the revenue maintenance, we have a significant amount of capital funding that comes from the combined authority, and within that, that's the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. And the annual allocation for Calderdale is nearly just under £7 million. And in addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, we also have additional grant that is occasionally routed through the combined authority. And last year, that was a pot of money spread across 2 years to help deliver and tackle some of the potholes across the district. So the capital money that we have is also spread across a number of themes. Safer roads, which obviously has a good link to the previous item, is £440,000, and that allows us to deliver local safety schemes, speed management, and pedestrian crossings. We have money to help manage the network. This is largely around looking at the renewal of existing signals, but also the enhancement of existing signals or the introduction of new signals as well. The largest category by far is asset management enhancements, at nearly £6 million, and that's the capital funding that we have to address some of our carriageway defects, our structures and footways. And then the last category is for active travel, public rights of way, at just under £200,000. So how do we prioritise all of that funding? Well, each year we take a paper to Cabinet which sets out the maintenance programme for the coming year. We allocate about £3 million of the capital funding I've just mentioned to the carriageway maintenance. And this programme covers both surface dressing, carriageway resurfacing and patching. And we split that programme between the classified roads, which are the A, B and C roads, and the unclassified roads. Now, the programme is prioritised using a number of different surveys. So across every year, we survey the entire network. And there are several different kinds of surveys, from course visual inspections to vehicle mounted intelligent systems that can scan the network, and they're looking for defects and they're looking for deterioration based on previous surveys. what that survey and information and data allows us to do is to create a long list of roads that require further consideration. All of these roads would be categorised as red from the surveys, which flags that they are in need of maintenance. And what we do is, through a process of workshops, we prioritise that programme using engineering judgment, but also taking into account customer complaints, accident data, feedback from elected members, and links to other work. So there may be opportunities. So what I mean by that is there may be opportunities to deliver some improvements on the back of the capital scheme, which might mean that we either accelerate or delay an intervention, because actually it can be delivered through a different means. So what is the state of the network? So the latest available data is from the 2022 surveys, and we can see that we compare favourably on A roads to Yorkshire and Humber and the national picture. We're perhaps above the regional average in terms of our B and C roads, and slightly above the regional national average in terms of our unclassified roads. But these percentages are for red failing roads in need of maintenance. What we see when we look beneath those headline categories, and when we look at the underlying data, we know that the network is deteriorating, and we know that that's also the case for our neighbouring districts and nationally. So we have 6% of roads rated as red, but 33% rated as amber. So there would be roads that we would want to do something with ideally before they get to red. But clearly at the moment we're targeting the red in need of maintenance work. We know and want to do more work to update our asset management plan, and this is work that's going to be commissioned in the coming year to help us better understand how we should be targeting the funding that we have, and better understand the underlying assets and what we should be putting in place to maximise the funding that we've got. So what are the next steps? The next steps are we will bring our capital maintenance programme paper to Cabinet in March. We will update and commission our asset management plan, and this will include engagement with councillors on how we prioritise the maintenance work that we do. And we're also aiming to improve transparency of the process and the information that we have available to the public for them to see where we're investing funding and where their road is in terms of the overall prioritisation process. And lastly, underpinning all of this work is the resource within the teams. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is quite a lot of competition across the districts and across the market for experienced, qualified highway traffic engineers. And we're going to have a real drive in the coming months to try and fill some of those roles to enhance our capacity to look at some of the issues we've talked about under road safety, but also in terms of the wider highway maintenance programme and some supporting our capital programme as well. So in summary, the highway network is the council's largest and most valuable asset. It provides access to jobs, services, schools and healthcare. The network is large and complex, and overall the condition of the network is deteriorating, with demand for maintenance activity greater than the available funding. So I will pause at that point, if that is okay, Chair, and I will take questions on anything in terms of the overview that I've given.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Okay, members, if you want to gather your thoughts for a moment, and if there are any questions, yes, straight off the blocks, Katie Kimber, Councillor Kimber, please, thank you.
Sorry, potholes. So I regularly travel down a route that is only fit for one car, and it suffers with horrendous water runoff. So potholes appear every week and are fixed every week, which, credit where credit's due, it really is a really fast turnaround on filling those potholes. The contractors are out there, they're quick, concise, and they get it done. But the week after, the pothole reappears or a new one reappears, and you have to fix it because your car is definitely going over it because you've got no space to do anything else. You've got a wall either side. I know this is like magic one time, but what is the products that we're using and the system that we've got? Could we save money in the long run by using something else? Now, I know I haven't got any research of any of this. I haven't looked. But in other countries or in other areas of the actual stuff that they use to fill the potholes, is it right for us in our conditions on our roads with the excess of runoff that we've got and heavy farm vehicles and things like that, and volume of traffic that's using the roads? I know that eventually it's going to get these roads that are suffering are going to get resurfaced, but they don't last very long when they are resurfaced, and it causes a lot of disruption. Obviously, we have the road closed for a period of time, and then that puts pressure on the supporting roads that people are then using, and we come full circle, don't we? So yeah, I just want to know what sort of research has been done on different products that can be used. And then a second point, I had absolutely no idea that we had 39,000 gullies. You're not going to be able to answer this, but I just wondered how many of those are like reoccurrent issue gullies. I'll let you take that away with you because I know you're definitely not going to be able to answer that right now. I can probably tell you how many I've reported in my ward and have successfully been cleared. But yeah, I had absolutely no idea. That is a massive, massive challenge for you, potholes and gullies, and I just think it's a real big stuff we've talked about tonight that is just not going to be solved overnight, and we have to keep trucking, don't we, and seeing if there's a better way of doing things. So that's my points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber. Sorry, before we come back, I'd like to augment that question with regard to the potholes. Councillor Bellinger has been talking about this smart machine which can do them really fast and really cheaply. I'm just wondering if there are any thoughts about incorporating one of those ones at all. Thanks. Just to augment Councillor Kimber there. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber. Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. I'm conscious we do have a few slides on potholes, but I perhaps pass to Jonathan to answer the points that have been raised. And then if we get any more questions on potholes, maybe we'll just canter through the slides quickly, Chair. But Jonathan, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think the fact is that the roads where we get potholes occurring are roads that are in the amber and the red categories that Adrian's explained is known from the surveys. And once a road starts unravelling, it's got to the end of its life. It's like that jumper that starts getting holes in it, it just gets more holes in it. So therefore, once we start seeing potholes, and rather than just the one-off ones, we start seeing numerous potholes, that's a real indicator that the road has basically just got to the end of its life. We've got to remember a lot of the roads in Calderdale were built when we had horses and carts and pack horses. They're not significantly engineered roads, and actually the heavy traffic and things does have an effect on them. The material we use is actually, most of the time we use hot tarmac. We have deliveries every morning, and that's used. Does a really good job of doing a really good repair. The problem normally is that, and I see this as well myself personally on the routes I drive, once the road starts opening up and unravelling, it's on its way, and actually I just know that we're waiting for the next one to come. Interestingly, Adrian asked for some photos yesterday, and actually when my officer went out to take the photos of a road that he had potholed last week, he found 2 further potholes this week that he had filled straight away, because that road has just got to that point where it's just unravelling on us. So we have looked at other methods in the past. The method that's been mentioned in the past is that Councillor Bellinger just talked about, is a thing called jet patching. Jet patching is a very effective means of maintaining roads in big rural shires. Extremely effective at repairing that type of road network. We have trialled it in the past in Calderdale, and actually on nice, quiet rural country roads, it's a really good solution. But it's not a fit solution for anywhere that's residential or got population, due to the type of way it does its process. It would be quite dangerous using that location. So we have trialled it, and we've done a lot of work in the past on that. Just quickly on gullies, Katie. Yes, we do have some problem gullies. And those are Sean, who's my drainage officer, is currently working through. And every time we get really bad problem gullies, they actually get pulled from their time status that we work on, and it's brought forward into a higher status. So we brought some recently from 5 years through to 2. But gullies are one of those ones where, looking at the number, we just can't get around them all in time. And that's an honest opinion on that one.
Great stuff. Thank you for that. Any more pothole questions, or should we move on to the next part? I can't see all their hands raised. So yeah. Oh, hang on. Councillor Foster just getting under the wire.
Well, it would be remiss of me not to comment, seeing as I reported about, I don't know, 6-7 roads, I think, by the app the other day, because I mean, there's some where there's potholes the size of dinner plates, and you know, I mean, there's a couple where you might lose a small child in them if they get any deeper. So yeah, I mean, hats off to you to doing as much as you can with the pitifully small budget that you've got, really. It's incredibly frustrating that we don't have enough budget to resurface all the roads that desperately need it, and all we can do is to keep applying sticking plasters. But you know, I'm grateful for what you do. Yeah, so it's really tricky, isn't it? Because we get so many complaints about potholes and how people have damaged their cars on potholes, and you know, all of that sort of stuff. So just wondering if you have any sort of whether or not you keep any records of the amount of complaints that you get where damage to vehicles or property is involved, where people have hit potholes. I'm not sure whether you have that sort of information to hand, but if you can, I'm just curious to know sort of how many people actually complain about damage to their vehicles because of the amount of potholes. And actually, the other thing that really surprised me was that it was only 3% of the network that's red, because it feels like quite a lot more than that sometimes when you're driving along. But I guess it's the 3% that people drive on most often that is in the red category, and everything, you know, all the less well used routes are less likely to be in the red category. So yeah, but yeah, just be interested to know about those figures if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to respond, I think probably to the last point you've made, it was 3% of A roads, but 18% of unclassified roads that are deemed as red and failing. And I think it was, when we looked across the classified roads A, B and C, it's 33% that are rated as amber, so approaching fail and approaching the need for repair. So it certainly is, you know, a big challenge. I don't know off the top of my head. I know we get a lot of complaints about potholes. I know across the service we get, last year I think we had 29,000 contacts relating to highways, whether that's streetlights, signs, potholes, litter. So we get a huge volume of customer contacts asking for, you know, or reporting in the case of a streetlight that's out, or asking for things to be done. Again, I don't have the data to hand, but we also hold a record of the claims that we've had, and we've got quite a good record of refuting claims because we can demonstrate that we're managing the network. But it's a real challenge, and again, when we look at the numbers, all of the budget lines are under significant pressure, partly because of inflation that we've seen in recent years, but also because of the condition of the network, which is just becoming increasingly challenging to maintain. I think just picking up on perhaps the previous question and Jonathan's response, I don't think this is in the slides either, but in terms of repairing a pothole, you can do what's called a temporary repair or a permanent repair. A temporary repair is what most people probably refer to as a pack and whack, where tarmac or bitumen material is put into the pothole and then compacted. A permanent repair takes a little bit longer, where the carriageway is cut out that is then cleaned out and then properly filled and sealed again and compacted. The problem that Jonathan's flagged is quite right, that actually it's not possible to do permanent repairs where the surrounding carriageway it has effectively life expired. But we certainly are looking, with the additional funding that we've got, to try and do more permanent repairs. And we are looking at other technologies that some of our neighbouring districts have, as to whether that could be effective for us. It has been looked at in the past. And one of the challenges we have is, if you purchase one of those machines, you need a programme of work and you need the funding for that machine to go through the work. But one of the suggestions that we've been discussing with one of our neighbouring districts is whether we could get them in to deliver some of the pothole fund work, so we can see firsthand how they operate that equipment and how that works for them in terms of a sort of shared learning. So it is something we're really aware of and want to explore further. It may be that it's not appropriate for the topography and the nature of our network, or the volume of work that we have, or the funding that we have, but we're certainly, alive to emerging technologies and innovation and what others are doing to tackle what is a really, really challenging issue.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next part of the presentation, if we may, Adrian.
We certainly can. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, so apologies, just bear with me while it catches up. So we've had a couple of questions on potholes. We've actually now got a few slides on potholes. So Jonathan, could I just ask you to speak to these slides, and then let's see if that perhaps gets any further questions.
Yeah, just before we talk about potholes, what we mean and sort of how we deal with it in Calderdale at the moment. There's no actual national definition of what a pothole is. But to me, a pothole is considered a depression or hole in the road that's caused by wear or subsidence. There's no defined minimum depths or size, but the people that do look at in the council looking at this are assessing these on a risk-based approach. Next slide, please, Adrian. So we thought we'd just talk about some of the categories so you're aware. Category 0 is something that a defect that we represent is immediate or imminent hazard, where if we don't do something about it, there's danger to road users. We allow ourselves a 2-hour window for this. That basically breaks down to a 1-hour window for back office and a 1-hour window for operational resources to be allocated to arrive and action the defect. And the photos on the right-hand side are just examples of what we'd class as a category 0 response. This is something that we will carry on 365, 24/7. So if one of those comes in now, it will get an hour response. Thank you, Adrian. Most sort of defects tend to fall in the next two categories, category 1s and 2s. Category 1 is a defect that requires attention but doesn't need us to go now. So I'm sorry, I'd checked the slides earlier and I've missed this. Category 1s now are actually 7 working days, not 24 hours. This was a thing that was changed as part of new code of guidance that came out. And we're now on 7 working days on these type of defects. And you can see from the photographs, these aren't ones that are going to immediately do some damage to you, but they do need some attention within sort of that working week. Thank you, Adrian. Category 2s are defects that are below that level that we need to get it done straight away, but we're still going to do something about it, because actually a stitching time does save 9 in a lot of these situations, and these will be actioned or repaired in this time span. Thank you. And what we call category 3 defects are those defects that need attention. We can't leave them to be added to the roads to be assessed for schemes. They still need attention, and these get picked up normally by one, and an inspector goes and looks at it, decides on a repair method, and that gets allocated out to a gang on a longer time span. Thank you. How do we deal with potholes? Most potholes that arrive at the council come through the contact centre or through online web forms. That creates a service request that comes into the admin team and strategic infrastructure. And they're the ones who deem the priority at that point in time and allocate those, and they get allocated out straight to a gang. We use a system, a computerized system, that is actually seamless right through from job arriving to gang. The gangs all have handhelds. The job comes through on the handheld, and they do that. In the morning, they get allocated with all the jobs that are currently arrived in the morning. If any category zeros come in, we look for the nearest gang on the satellite tracking, and they are pulled off whatever they're doing, and they're allocated to that category 0 job. It does mean that some days a gang will actually never do what we hoped they were going to do when they left the depot. They'll spend the entire day bouncing from emergency to emergency. But that's what's important for the public, is to make sure the public is safe. Thank you.
Happy to pause there again, Councillor, or keep going on traffic regulation orders.
I think a brief pause might be in order. Now, I'm just mindful of the fact, I think the last time this came up in front of myself was when I was sitting with Strategy and Performance, and councillors were almost falling off their chairs in their eagerness to point out roads in their wards which needed imminent repair that certainly weren't being addressed within the timeframes as indicated in the presentation just now. And I suspect that I just want to try to circumvent that barrage coming in now because of pressure of time. I can think of several streets in my ward off the top of my head. So yes, sympathy for the devil, and I fully understand what you're trying to say to us, Jonathan. And I do fully understand the pressure of resources that mean that we don't always get the service that we would like to see as per that presentation. However, it mentions those 2 methods of contact, and it's a recurrent theme for myself and for, I think, many other councillors, that member highways, the email address there, often it seems to disappear into a void, never to be seen again. Especially with regard to potholes, the gullies tend to be pretty good, in my experience, very good, in fact. When I report those, the potholes and other road repairs, yeah, you kind of wonder whether anyone's at the other end of it sometimes. I was wondering your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, member highways is actually the same admin team that take all the customer contact centre stuff that comes through. So they will look at them, and they will categorize them, and they will log them into the system as a job. There is the odd time where, especially if a really long email trail comes in, and the way somebody's written something comes across the wrong way, that maybe it's actually sent to an area officer to look at as an inspection rather than going allocated out straight out to a gang. I think that sometimes puts a bit of a delay in it. But I know the staff that work in there are very diligent about. Certainly, I get quite a lot of chase ups when I haven't replied to them with information that councillors are wanting. So I think if there is a particular case, let us know about it. I'll talk to Richard that works in Adrian's team, who manages that area, and we'll investigate it and find out what the gap is, because we don't want gaps to be happening, because that's just not acceptable.
No, I appreciate that, and I'm thankful. And it's actually, as you mentioned it, yeah, I did ask for an inspection rather than a response. Because my opinion of what looks like a pretty horrible road to drive on, it may be different from the engineering perspective. But so yeah, I appreciate. Yeah. I appreciate your response to that.
Factors that to bear in mind is that, for example, one of my officers that does as one of my air officers, for about a week when we had bad weather, spent pretty much all his life just running gritting. So therefore he dropped behind on his workload, and that takes a bit of catching up, once they're built up. One thing I'll just sort of share with you, that as a service, if we need to get an extra gang in to do work to keep up with what the jobs are coming through the door, we bring extra gangs in. We have to then obviously raid money that we would use maybe for some permanent works to get on the top of temporary stuff. but we always aim to make sure all emergencies and category 1s are done within the time span, and that if that means extra gangs or overtime for the staff.
Yeah, point taken, especially with regard to the safety aspect of that. So yeah. Before we move on to TROs, any other thoughts and comments from members? Because as well, I did jump in there with both feet. So I don't know if anyone else has anything to offer. No. Yes, Councillor Foster.
I just wanted to say thank you actually to the Member Highways team. I know that they are always really responsive. I know that sometimes it takes a while to get a response from whoever they've sent the query on to, but the team that initially pick up our emails tend to be very, very good, and I just want to say thank you to them.
No, fair play. Great, on to TROs then, I think, which is am I correct in thinking that's the last part of it?
It is.
Yeah,
get quicker at this now. So, as I said at the start of this item, I'm aware that members are interested in traffic regulation orders. That's perhaps a term they hear a lot in relation to some of the requests that come through. So the traffic regulation order really it's a legal document that allows us to support a range of measures. Hang on a second. That allows us to support a range of measures that effectively rule or restrict the use of the public roads. And examples of that would be weighting or loading restrictions, one-way streets, weight, width, length restrictions, speed restrictions, band turns and bus lanes. It's UK law, and a TRO must be in place for a restriction to be legally enforced. And we as the Traffic Authority need to create them. And we do that for a number of reasons. Primarily, that's around safety of road users, but we also use them to support and protect the character or amenity of an area and to stop serious damage to roads, bridges, or other structures. There are essentially 4 different types of traffic regulation order. There is a permanent TRO, which is a legally enforceable order, and that's a process that can take quite a lot of time, and I'll talk a bit more about that process in the later slides. There are experimental TROs, and we use these where we genuinely are unsure of the outcome of the proposed TRO, and it's a good way to trial that to get the feedback from road users and others as to the effectiveness of that measure. We then have temporary TROs, and these are typically used to restrict the road during utility works or private developments. And then we have emergency temporary TROs, and these are perhaps where, I don't know, a highway wall has collapsed or a sinkhole has appeared, and we need to close that section of road using these emergency powers for public safety. So again, we've touched on this quite a bit today in terms of how we prioritise the resources that we have when looking at TROs. And again, we've got Steve on the line. He's got quite a small team, very dedicated, very experienced, lots of knowledge, but a phenomenal amount of workload. And we need to prioritise their work. And at the moment, a lot of their work is very much focused on supporting our capital programme, which is clearly very important right across the borough. But we also look at public requests to introduce changes to the highway, and that might be where a community wants us to restrict the size of vehicles perhaps that are accessing their road, or to look at, as we mentioned earlier, speed reductions. And all of these requests need to be reviewed and prioritised by our traffic liaison officer against some agreed criteria. And if that location scores sufficiently highly, we would look to implement that change when possible. So again, it would go on to the forward work plan, and when we got to that, we would look to do the necessary design work and appraisal work and engagement and consultation work to make those changes. So the TRO process itself is governed by the governing body, And the purpose of the governing body is to make decisions on proposed orders, and also to check and challenge whether the procedure is working and to make changes to it as required. So the TRO process, when we break it down, starts with scheme development, and this might have originated with a sort of customer request or a capital scheme or a private development that requires a change and requires input from the traffic engineers to look at that design. We then enter a stage called the informal consultation, and that's a stage where a design is, the initial design is put out for consultation with partner organisations such as the Combined Authority and Emergency Services, but also that's consulted with councillors and directly affected residents, but it's not publicly advertised. The feedback then from that informal consultation then comes back to the governing body, and the governing body takes on board those comments and the responses from the team to those comments, whether they're in favour or against the change, and they take a decision on whether the TRO should progress to formal consultation or whether changes should be made, or whether the TRO should stop at that point. On the assumption that it should progress, there's then a further check of the documents, and this is where there's a lot of input from legal to ensure that the paperwork is correct, and that everything is as it should be before that then goes out to statutory consultation. Statutory consultation requires a legal notice and advertising, and is generally for a minimum period of 21 days, where we invite people's views and comments on the proposals. Once we've received the feedback from the formal consultation, again, that comes back to the governing body, who take on board those comments and the responses from the team proposing and promoting the regulation order, and a decision is then made on whether or not to change or proceed with that TRO. Again, on the assumption that TRO is approved, the necessary legal work is prepared and checked, and that is advertised prior to implementation. And then we plan and program in the changes, whether that is lining or changes to road markings or road signs. And I will stop there, Chair, and receive questions on the TRO process, or any other questions that people may have on any of the presentation presented tonight.
Thank you very much indeed for that. I've got a couple myself, but first, again, Councillor Kimber.
Thank you. Mine's really quick question. Is there a case to be made for investing in the TRO service to make it work better? I know that we've got lots of requests within our ward for closing roads, restricting roads, doing various things with roads to help flow and help our communities, really. So I just wondered what future plans. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kimber. So I think the simple answer is yes, we would like to increase the capacity of that team. When you talk about the TRO team, what we're really talking about is the traffic engineering team, which is, from my perspective, sort of the beating heart of the highway service. That they are responsible for TROs, but they're also responsible for a lot of the other design work and expertise that we hold within the service. So clearly, there's a lot of demand on that team in terms of the expertise and knowledge that they have. There are a few challenges. One, it's a small team anyway, given the workload that we have, and we're looking for ways to increase the number of posts within that team, because actually quite a lot of their work can be charged to capital, so we can generate an income to pay for those roles. The other challenge we have, unfortunately, is our ability to fill those roles when we go out to recruitment. And again, I previously talked about the challenges, I think, across the market in terms of that knowledge and expertise. But it is something that I'm very aware of, and I know the managers across the service are very focused on. We've actually just had approved some enhanced graded roles. So we'll be going out to market imminently to see whether we can bring in additional resource to better support that team and all of the work that they do, including the requests that you've mentioned in terms of TROs. And let's see where we go. So if we get those additional engineers on board, that will be a great result for the service. And then we can further review the workload moving forwards.
Thank you, Adrian. It's almost like you needed just a dedicated team just for that, isn't it? Just to take the pressure off your highways guys like Steve, who's on the call tonight, who I have regular contact with. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Good evening, Councillor Lynn. You've got your hand raised.
Good evening. Yes, I just wanted to say, well, first of all, I wanted to say it's been, I found this evening really useful and really interesting. And I think the debate points and the questions and that have come through from members of the panel have been really good. And the second thing I want to say is just a big thank you to Adrian and Jonathan and Steve, and also an honourable mention to Ryan here, because one of the things we've not had time to talk about tonight is the public rights of way work. And I regularly attend something called an organisation, a bit of the system really, called the Local Access Forum, and which brings together people who have a particular interest in rights of way, and that might be, you know, people who use bridleways, people who, you know, the horse fraternity, if you like, cyclists, walkers, and so on. So I'm also very conscious of that. I just wanted to give an honourable mention to the work that goes on in relation to rights of way, because I think that's something we probably won't have time, Chair, to deal with it tonight. But just the final point is that I think I hope members of the panel have found this useful in terms of understanding the actual processes and the systems that are in place to try to deal with what's some really kind of complex and challenging setups with, as always, never enough money really and never enough time. But I hope people found it useful. I've certainly found the questions and that. I've made a lot of notes here. I found the questions that members have raised very useful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lynn. Yeah, actually, I can imagine rights of way becoming a bit of a hot topic going forward when it comes to addressing those sort of things as it impacts with the local plan unfolding as new estates are built through rights of way and what have you. So may well be something we come back to in the future to look at. Right. I can't see any other hands raised, and I want to bring the meeting to a close fairly shortly, but I do want to have a bit of a moan first, and also a couple of questions. The moan really is on behalf of Councillor Whitaker, who has been for quite a long period of time been trying to get the situation addressed on Car Green Lane, where a TRO was put in place and has been there, about a decade. In fact, it was Councillor Beale, who was before my time, councillor who was doing work. It was at a point where things were going to happen that it didn't happen, and it's almost as though things have had to start all over again. I mean, I'm guessing the TROs do expire eventually, do they, or is it just somehow or other managed to slip behind the work plan? Then I've got a couple of questions, if that's all right.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to hopefully not put Steve on the spot too much, but as this definitely predates my arrival at the council, I wonder, Steve, whether you could say anything in response to the issue that Councillor Dickinson's raised on behalf of Councillor Whitaker. Otherwise, Chair, we will have to respond outside of the meeting, if that's okay.
No, I fully understand that. It might be one for outside, yeah.
I can partly answer the question. Again, myself, I've not been sort of involved right since day one, but certainly over the last handful of years. It is one of those schemes that, because of the level of resources that we've got, we haven't had the capacity to deal with it. We do have a draft scheme in place that does need reviewing, and we are basically we're awaiting another capital scheme in the area, which we haven't had up until very recently. We are expecting a couple within the next few months, so hopefully we'll be able to start picking it up then. But yeah, it's a capacity issue, I'm afraid.
Right, I appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed. Right, the thought has been brought up, and it's with regard to TROs actually. to what extent there is member involvement in TROs and other highways issues, in terms of how.
You've just gone to mute, Councillor Dickinson.
Sorry, yes, it's respect to the sort of the governments in terms of the way that TROs are implemented and everything in that respect. Is there an absence of oversight in terms of governance with regard to the TROs?
Steve, would you be able to answer the question by Councillor Dickinson?
Again, I'm not sure if there's an answer. A decision was made some time ago, 2015, I think, when the current procedure was developed, that there wasn't an interest at that time for councillors to be involved in the process. Whether or not there's still a demand for that, whether there's a demand for that now, I couldn't say. But yeah, that was the general reason behind it at the time.
Yeah, I mean, if I can come back with it a bit, it was with regard that that traffic issues can be quite locally controversial. You know, for example, there have been petitions about double yellow lines in the past, for example, because the TROs is a totally officer body, and whether perhaps member involvement could be involved in those decisions. But that said, hang on, Councillor Lynn looks like she might have an answer for us in that regard. Yeah, so yeah.
No, it's not an answer. It might not be, or put it this way, what I'm going to say might not be what you want to hear, Chair. I feel very strongly that the role of officers is quite critical here. I mean, I think the role of ultimately full council, but the role of the council is to set the policies and the method of prioritisation. And then I think it's quite important that on the whole, we let the officers get on with it. I think you've already seen going right through the processes that in all cases, one of the factors that determines, for example, the actual prioritisation of capital programmes and everything is the views of members. So elected members are the views of elected members, as well as the views of residents coming in the form of petitions and so on and so forth. Those are all fed into the process when decisions have to be made about improvement to roads and also about traffic regulation orders. But my own view is that if we were to have a situation where all 51 councillors were slugging it out in a political bunfight as to, well, my road's more important than your road, I don't think that would get us anywhere, to be quite honest with you. I think what is important is that that members are happy with the methodology, and that in a way this scrutiny panel is part and parcel of that. This scrutiny panel review process is part and parcel of that you feel happy and confident that the arrangements that are underway for both the inspection of roads or for the way in which traffic regulation orders are handled or anything else is suitable. And then I think my own view would be that actually it would be extremely difficult. I mean, I've got roads in Park Ward where people want double yellow lines, and I could, or they want this, that, and the other, and I could very easily sort of try and pull rank and say, no, Park Ward roads are more important than anybody else's roads. It would be entirely wrong, and I wouldn't do it. And I'm not suggesting other members would do it, but I'm just saying that the pressure that that you all as elected councillors would come under to be trying to kind of subvert the system of rational prioritisation and allocation of resources, I think might be something that would cause you as elected councillors more problems than it would solve. But again, that might not be a popular view, and I can see Councillor Blackburn wanting to come in. But I just put that out on the table there. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that, and it does raise the question in terms of whether we as members have confidence in that prioritisation ladder, and whether we feel potentially that there may be a call for the need for a review in that respect. So that may be a battle for another day for consideration potentially. Okay. yeah, Councillor Bradbury, I'll bring you in, and I've got one more, and then I'd like to move on to the next part of the agenda, which is going to be the work programme. It's been a late one, and I appreciate everyone's patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the officers for the updates. Most interesting information. I guess my main issue, and I will keep going on about my main issue, and this is about the lack of effective communication. It's often we want to know when things are actually happening. So actually, I agree that potentially we shouldn't be involved in the process. However, it's about the updates at every stage. We feel constantly we're having to chase when something's been done, and that in itself actually creates more officers' time backwards and forwards. So actually, it's about how do we have better communication to inform councillors what's happening within their patch. So I think that's the main issues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So with regard, but my final point really with the TROs, I'm just sort of puzzling over your point as well, how because quite often I do get letters informing me of formally from legal with regard to the implementation of TROs in the area. But there are other times when you are left in the dark and wondering, hang on a second, where have all these cones come from? Now, with the regards to the governing body with the TROs, does it explicitly consider how traffic proposals contribute to addressing council priorities with regard, for example, the climate emergency, reducing inequalities in thriving towns? And should the membership of the governing body be expanded to bring in specialists from those areas?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, I've just had some issues with Zoom, so I've had to drop out and come back in. But I think I've heard your question there. I think I'm picking up that there's questions about I suppose the makeup of the governing body and the role of the governing body. Again, some of this was done before my time. Apologies, but I know this has been looked at very carefully by legal. So I think we can take it away and see when the last review was done and whether it's time now for a further review. But in terms of bringing in wider views from the council, I think that's that's an interesting idea and one I'll take back and perhaps we'll discuss at the next meeting.
No, that's fair enough. Appreciate that. It's setting it against the council set priorities, and whether it effectively delivers on those. Right, listen. Thank you very, very, very much indeed, Adrian. You must be your voice must be deserving a break. You've been doing a lot of talking, and I certainly do appreciate it. And I'd also like to thank the other officers, Jonathan, Steve, Ryan. I know you've had a non-playing member of the band role tonight, and I appreciate that. And thank you for coming along. And the footpaths, I think, will be one to come back to definitely. I'd like to say thank you to Neil from Wicked for coming along this evening as well. And again, Bono's been patiently there in the background. Unfortunately, we've not had to need to speak with him. But I would like to say to all of you, thank you very much indeed for coming along tonight. And it's been a lively and interesting debate on what is, it touches many people's lives. This, and it's a big one, and on both aspects of both subjects that we've covered tonight. So I can't be effusive enough, really. Thank you very much indeed, and enjoy the rest of your evening. So thanks a lot. Yeah, and also thanks Sheila. Yeah,
it's all right. I don't need thanks, Chair. Have a lovely evening, all of you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Going to do the work.
Right. Members, appreciate your patience as well. But there's been aspects of this which I think have been worth digging deeper into. I'd really like to say thank you for your involvement this evening. It's been one that's obviously important to us as members. So moving on to the work programme. Hang on, let me just pull up the agenda in terms of what we've got left for the rest of this municipal year. We've got the next meeting. Just bear with me. There we are. Sorry about this. That's September, October, November. We've got the next meeting coming up on the 7th of March, when we'll be sitting as the Crime and Disorder Board, where we bring back the knife crime detailed review that we looked at. yeah, there was a lot of positive feedback from members on that one in terms of how engaging that one particularly was. And also with regard to the cabinet response to the domestic abuse detailed review, which I seem to remember that Helen Riverman was quite involved with, and Councillor Lynn's coming back to the board to discuss that with us. And the final one was going to be the 18th of April with regard to bereavement services. Are we affected by PERDA in terms of anything else potentially available for the April meeting? Mike, I suppose.
I don't think so, Chair. Not that if you remember, the bereavement issue is going to be at the crematorium, and it's going to be, as I guess, an information receiving and discussing item. It's business as usual. I don't think it's affected by the pre-election period.
Yes, in that regard, yeah. In that case, it'll have to be that one item agenda then, won't it? It's just that, for example, the footpass issue. I wonder if there's going to be scope for that to be considered by place going forward. Councillor Kimber.
Yeah, I just wanted to support you on that. That rights of way, I think, would be a really good one for us to have in a place to have a session on that. I mean, I think we've probably got more rights of way here than anywhere in West Yorkshire. So I think it'd be really good for us to have that if we can squeeze it in somewhere.
I suspect, if I'm honest, it's going to be sometime in the new municipal year, and if I'm very lucky enough to be reappointed as chair of place, it's something I'd like to see as well. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see what the new municipal year brings in that regard. But I've got my fingers crossed that I'm still going to be here. Well, I'm not facing re-election this time, but in terms of my position as chair of place, because yeah, I love this board. It's great fun. Mike, sorry.
Just to say, those of you who've been on the board for a little while will remember Audrey Smith, former Councillor Smith, who was the deputy chair. She raised issues about rights of way and priorities for the enforcement team on rights of way. So it has been looked at in the past, but it's probably well worth bringing back again. I would agree with you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I've been having some discussions with another councillor and also with members of the scrutiny team with regards to aspects of homelessness. I'm getting a sense that this particular issue, which is a fairly specific one, I don't know if I want to talk about it publicly, particularly just at this moment in time, I suspect might be coming back and one of it might be something that the board might need to address as well in the new municipal year. So I just wanted to sort of, perhaps in general terms rather than just specific as well. But there may be some issues there which I was wondering we might be able to sort of pencil that in as well. But yeah, it might be a discussion to be had offline to consider that one further. Mike and Libby and Ben. Is Ben here? No, he wandered off. So yeah, Libby, sorry, thank you, waiting patiently there.
No, that's absolutely fine, and that links to what I was going to say actually, because I just wanted to use this opportunity really quickly, because I know the time, to remind members about the upcoming housing detailed review, and as you mentioned, the council's approach to sort of temporary accommodation and homelessness will be covered within one of the 2 days. So this is the last formal board that we've got before the detailed review and the 2 scrutiny sessions, which are being held on February 21st and March the 5th. They're both beginning at 4 p.m. and they're both in person in Halifax Town Hall. So it'd be really helpful if members could just sort of let me know and confirm attendance, or in case there's any issues in relation to timings and maybe arriving later on. That would be really helpful if people could let me know.
Libby, could you just repeat those dates again, please? I want to get them into my diary now.
Sorry, yeah, I think an appointment has gone out, but just to let you know, they are the 21st of February and the 5th of March.
21st of February. And what sort of time were we talking about?
They're starting at 4 p.m.
4 p.m. Oof, it's going to be close one. We've got, yeah, okay, I'm going to stick it in knife crime.
It's not knife crime.
It's housing.
Yeah. Knife crime.
Those are diary holds at the moment. Are they
housing, Councillor Dickinson, not knife crime.
Oh, my apologies. Housing. Housing on the 21st. and that's live. And the other date was March the 5th, did you say?
March the 5th, yeah.
I'm going to be late for that one. Oh, actually, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I can be on time for that one. All right, thank you. Appreciate that. And thank you for your patience sparing me whilst I fiddle about my phone here.
No, that's absolutely fine. I just wanted to say that colleagues in housing have been working really hard to produce loads of reports on various issues and areas of work in relation to housing, and the agenda and reports will be sent to you from me the standard week before. Councillor Brundell, I know you're leading on this, so without stepping on Councillor Dickinson's toes, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything extra to that.
Yeah, and apologies because it's quite loud in here now. Yeah, so I think a few of the items that are topics that have come up before, like empty homes and damp and mold issues in homes, that sort of thing, are being covered within items on those days. So yeah, we've very much done the agenda with an eye to things that members have brought up before. And like Libby says, temporary accommodation, and that is within it as well. So yeah, it might be that there's some stuff there that we want to pick up on in next year's work program and stuff. So yeah, we've done it with an eye to things that have been mentioned previously. And like Libby says, yeah, if we can confirm attendance, then that really helps things out as well. So yeah.
Great stuff. Just a quick one. How long do you anticipate those meetings lasting?
Yeah, go on, Libby.
Sorry, they're 4 p.m. till 8 p.m, so they're 2 full-on scrutiny in a day sessions.
Right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I was just going to say as well, yeah, a lot of work's been going to them. One of the things that's being done is some videos being produced by the housing team with an effort to make sure that we're really including the voices of people that are affected by these issues. So yeah, hopefully it's being approached in a way that is really sort of inclusive of those voices and making sure they're heard as well. So yeah, it should be really interesting. And yeah, so much work is going on, and huge thank you to Libby and Mike within that as well.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else, members? No, I think we're there, aren't we? Right, in that case, thank you very much indeed. Thank you to Howard. Breaking biscuits, excellent. Thanks also to Howard for standing in tonight. Yeah, good to see you as always. It's been a really good evening tonight. I've enjoyed it, and I'm sorry it's finished so late, but I think it was worth the time. So enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody, and see you in due course. All the best. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.